were saying. So I learned English as a youngster. By the time I started first grade, at age 8, I could read and write English because my parents spoke English now and then. Do we have a question over here?
Me? My name is Berndry, and
Susan, our attention's over in that corner.
yes.
Yeah. We had a question over there, but since we're over in that corner, we'll face this way a little bit. I find that as I go across this country, I find that a lot of people are interested in Indians, and sometimes it helps to go ahead and ask for questions. That way we understand each other a little better. So if you have any questions, just don't hesitate, because we'll all learn. Go ahead.
I don't have a question, I just have a statement. My dad served in World War II, my dad, and he told me stories, and he was so amazed and in awe of the code talkers, the crow talkers. And I grew up hearing all the stories, and it just, I'm so thrilled that I can be here. I can't wait to call him tomorrow and tell him I actually sat in the presence of one of the famous crow talkers. So I just want to say thank you, because obviously my father is not Native, but he taught me to admire and to be proud of the people, the indigenous people of the nation, because they were strong and powerful and smart. And so, unfortunately, my mother divorced him and married a Native American. But but that didn't change it for him. So thank you, and I'm so proud to be here.
Well, thank you. Question?
Well, I wanted to address her question about language. I'm Aleut, and I found out we really are Inumbans from the Aleutian Islands, and our language is in fact dying. There's only 1,000 of us left. We used to be a huge amount of people, but the Russians came in and decimated. The history was horrid. And what we're trying to do is revive the language, because the feeling is that once the language dies, the culture dies. The language is the culture and the language just go hand in hand. So we have, up in Bellingham, we have a dance group that's begun, and so it's nice to see that being revived. Because unfortunately, 1,000 people, that's very, very few. You have a huge nation compared to us.
Code talking was done to a fine tune in the Pacific. The Navajos broke radio silence, and they talked Navajo, and the Japanese were very good at decoding any kind of a code that the Americans came up with, but they never did figure out the Navajo language. And from that, they called Indian language speakers code talkers. We didn't talk code at all. All we did was just talk our own language, and only Crow speakers could understand what we were saying.
The Navajo language and the Athabascan language is the same, so it's the feeling that they are related because they have the same language.
True. And with us, it's kind of like the Navajo, not as well extended. Our parent tribe is the North Dakota tribes, and they speak the language that we speak, but theirs is the old language, and they're hard to understand for us. And for them to hear us, they understand us really easy. But the basic words we've changed, but they understand it better than we do. So between us and the Hidatsa of North Dakota, That's where we come from. So they and the Crows speak the same language. Other than that, other Indian languages we don't understand.
But definitely not the distance between the Dene people and the Athabascan that span the continent. Same way.
I was just wondering about your efforts in bilingual education. Like, what have you done with Protocol to encourage bilingual education and like preserving the indigenous language?
Bilingual ed.
Bilingual education came to the reservation, or to the tribe, years ago in the 1860s because of the missionaries. When the missionaries came, they tried to teach the Crow Indians how to say things in the Latin language in the Catholic Church. And from that, they tried to teach them Latin words. And I grew up listening to old Crow Indians speak a lot of Latin. They didn't know what they were saying, but they could repeat it because they memorized the language without knowing what it meant. And everything's kind of all crossed up. When you speak some of the language you don't understand, you just repeat the sounds. And that's how it all started. And in the 1860s or 1960s, they brought bilingual education to the Crow Reservation. And then we could see the difference between the English and the Crow language, and people who could speak both. And we had school teachers who would come to teach class, and they'd have kindergarten and first graders not understand a word of English. And it's tough teaching a class. They don't understand the teacher when he's trying to say something. So that we have teacher programs on the Crow Reservation to teach teachers the basic language so that they can keep the language limited to English rather than try to talk that broken Crow.
If I may say, part of his efforts were encouraging. He said that the Crow language was invented into a written language. He said a few years ago. That was actually quite a long time ago in the 60s, late 60s. And he encouraged the people who were then young. They were both his, what he calls his little brothers, as well as a sister-in-law, that he helped them get the formal education to get the credentials to understand language. And so Crow language became a written language under the tutelage of Noam Chomsky, and that was in the late 1960s. And from then on, he's always helped work to refine the alphabet and the writings, to implement it in the Head Start, the grade schools, the high schools, and then the Crow tribe now has a college, which he was instrumental in getting that going. And one of the fundamental pieces of the college is bilingual education and Crow culture, philosophy, and worldview. And he's also taught it at the State University of Montana and got it as accepted curriculum to where students are supposed to take a foreign language. Crow is actually considered a foreign language in the Montana University system, in part because of his efforts. So Crow students or non-Crow students can take Crow language and get credit for it. And then he also spanned beyond just Montana and worked with bilingual education on a national level, created language groups and regions, and tried to help have those same things modeled across the nation, as well as in Alaska. He worked up in Alaska a lot.
With the bilingual program, he would tell us stories in the 70s about catching the last bush plane out of certain villages. And as he went into the villages, he said, it was their last shipment for the season as the permafrost was starting to get a little spongy. He said, I would sit on
cases of pop and canned goods that was coming in. He said, and if I missed the plane out, he said, I was gonna be there for a long time, so I didn't miss the plane out. But visiting different villages and being involved with that bilingual program in the different Inuit and Alaskan villages.
Yeah, I have to raise my hands to the efforts that you're making to preserve your language, because in this area, Coast Salish, the Sutsi, is a language that goes along and is interspersed in between many different. I mean, they have their own slangs and their own versions of it, but they all used to be able to communicate. And one of the tribes that stood up is from up north here. They only had 10 fluent speakers left before they stepped up and said, we get, they actually got a video and made them just talk and talk and talk and talk, so all the words could be saved. And there was a woman from by Hilbert. She actually took it and drove it into the University of Washington and stood up and fought the fight. It sounds like a very similar fight that you guys are doing.
Language revitalization is essential to retention of the culture because the stories include that. You're saying they go so hand in hand that it's not too late. Like you say, somebody was down to 10 people, but to keep the culture alive, the understanding of what those words meant, what they entailed, because today there may be a different interpretation, but to understand what it meant to those folks that preceded us, you have to understand the language. Other comments?
I would like to comment on, I'm from the era of boarding school, and as an elder, I feel really kind of on the fringe of things, not knowing my language. And my grandchildren teach me. So it's across that communication. The thought of, I got back to my family when I was 22. And so I was raised away from any culture. But inside, I felt culture. The memories that I had of my grandmother and the things she taught me. My son, when he was in kindergarten, first grade, they were teaching a program, I'm a Yakima from Eastern Washington, and they were teaching they called it the YES program, Yakima, English, and Spanish. Well, when my niece was taking her class on one side of the school, on one side of town, and he was on the other side, when they get together, they couldn't understand each other because we had too many dialects. That's not how you say it. Well, Mrs. Umtech said that's how you say it. So they had that, so many dialects to try and learn. And I used to listen to my mother. I was small, and it was like, you could just feel it. You could just feel the words. And coming back to my reservation, a lot of it has changed, but I keep trying to insert myself into the community and learn about, what's happening there, and because I live here in Seattle now. So I felt so Indian one time when I went to this conference, and I walked in the room and I looked around and someone met my eyes. We were Indian. You can always look out into the crowd and see who are Indians, and you always manage to kind of congregate. So if no one has ever felt that, it's a wonderful feeling because all of a sudden you're in that circle of